Hey guys, tonight we set out from Venice, the city of canals, pigeons, and perpetual damp socks. Only, it's not the Venice. You know, with selfie sticks and overpriced cappuccinos. It's late 13th century Venice. The lagoon is still crowded with boats. The palaces along the Grand Canal gleam with sunlight bouncing off the water. And you're standing on the quay with a pack far heavier than any carry-on suitcase could ever be. You're about to head off with your father and uncle the Polos, and in case you forgot, this isn't some weekend getaway. It's a multi-year expedition to the farthest reaches of Asia, a journey that might kill you, but hey, at least your luggage will be historic. You probably won't survive this, but don't worry, we'll do it in the most boringly soothing way possible. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the damp air of Venice, the salty tang of the lagoon filling your nose as gondoliers shout, dogs bark, and merchants argue over bolts of cloth. The Polo family has already decided you're not just walking out of the city, you're stepping out of Europe itself. The first things you notice being loaded onto the barges are trunks, wooden chests, bound with iron scuffed by earlier voyages. Inside, the basics. No, not toothpaste and chargers. Think waxed cloaks for rain, extra shoes, linen shirts, blankets. A medieval packing list begins with survival, not comfort. And as the dockhands grunt and strain, you realize each chest weighs more than you do. At least you won't have to drag them through airport security. The lagoon is alive with sails. You smell tar from the shipyard. See nets drying on poles. Hear bells echoing from St. Mark's Campanile. Venice is a republic built on trade, so everyone watching you go knows exactly what you're risking and what you're chasing. Fortune knowledge, and maybe bragging rights. A mainstream fact by Marco Polo's day, Venice had already established itself as a powerhouse of Mediterranean trade, competing with Genoa for dominance. Ships carried spices, silks, and glassware across seas, and the city's wealth was legendary. Leaving this bustling hub felt like ripping yourself away from the center of the known world. Now, tucked among those heavier chests are smaller pouches, personal items. A knife with a bone handle, a purse of Venetian ducats, maybe even a small carved icon to keep divine protection close at hand. These are the things you'll actually feel against your hip as you walk through endless miles of dust and scrub. You pat the pouch like you would a pocket today, making sure it's still there every few minutes. Imagine losing your phone, but multiply that panic by 10. The family debates what else to pack. Do you bring too many linens, knowing they'll rot in damp weather, or too few, leaving you shivering under foreign skies? A quirky tidbit slips in. Here, travelers sometimes carried little pillow stones, smooth chunks of marble or clay, used as headrests to avoid lice crawling from bedding into hair. Not exactly a feather pillow, but well, it worked. Will you be cradling your head on a stone tonight? Quite possibly. As the barges push off, you catch your last glimpse of Venetian mosaics glimmering on the basilica. You feel the weight of departure in your stomach. Historians still argue whether Marco Polo actually saw all the places he described later in his famous book, or whether he embroidered stories borrowed from Persian merchants and other travelers. But in this moment, none of that matters. You're just a young Venetian with too many clothes, too many dreams, and not enough certainty. You try to distract yourself with the smell of roasted chestnuts being sold near the docks. It hits you no more easy meals from street vendors. From here on, food means whatever you can pack, trade, or beg. Your uncle suggests stuffing some dried figs and hard cheese into a smaller pouch, but you wonder how long that will last once the desert heat sets in. On the boat, you shift uncomfortably, the boards creaking beneath you. The trunks are lashed with rope, their contents clattering as waves slap against the hull. You hear your father muttering about schedules reaching Acre before winter finding the right caravans inland. You sigh. Already you sense that the greatest enemy isn't Mongols or bandits. It's logistics. The eternal struggle of packing too much and yet never enough. Night falls over the lagoon. Torches flicker along the shore, throwing long reflections across the water. The air cools and the constant insect buzz rises. You lie back against one of the chests, trying to picture where you'll be in a month. Constantinople, the Black Sea, or still stuck on some nameless road with sore feet and fewer shirts. At least Venice, noisy as it is, felt safe. Out here with only the stars above and the sound of rigging snapping in the wind, you feel the enormity of what's begun. The barge slides past low islands. Fishermen wave, children point. You're leaving behind every familiar street, every sound of Venetian bells. You may never return. The thought presses on you harder than the trunk behind your shoulders. Yet beneath the dread, a flicker of excitement stirs. What treasures, what stories, what mishaps wait in the east? You smirk to yourself, if nothing else, this will be one very long episode of What's in My Bag. The night grows colder. You wrap your cloak tighter, the fabric scratching at your neck, smelling faintly of sea salt and wax. Around you, sailors murmur prayers. One kisses a charm on his wrist. Another spits over the side to ward off evil. You close your eyes. The trunks shift, the ropes creak, and Venice fades into darkness behind you. The packing is complete. The journey has begun. You don't know it yet, but what sits in those chests will carry you across deserts, mountains, and empires. Every cloak, every coin, every crumb of cheese is the fragile thread tying you to survival. And tomorrow, you'll test it all on the open road. The sun comes up pale and weak a disk behind morning mist. The barge nudges into a small port on the Adriatic, a place far less grand than Venice wooden pier's gulls, shrieking the smell of fish, drying in baskets. This is where water travel ends and the hard miles on land begin. You swing your pack over your shoulder, wincing as the straps bite into muscle, not yet accustomed to the load. The path out of town is uneven mud sucking at your boots, wheels of carts rattling over stones. Merchants pass you, their donkeys clinking with bells, and you catch a whiff of spices, cinnamon, maybe pepper. Each whiff is worth its weight in gold, literally. Venice had built an empire trading these scents, and you're walking toward the places where they're born. A donkey brays behind you, startling you into a stumble. The driver laughs and calls out something in a dialect you don't understand. Already you're reminded that leaving Venice means leaving familiar speech. Even in this short distance, you feel like a foreigner. Your uncle pauses to adjust the strap of his own pack. He carries documents, letters of introduction written in Latin, sealed with wax requesting safe passage from rulers who may or may not care about Venetian credentials. These letters are your real ticket east, more valuable than any cloak or pouch of ducats. The road widens into rolling countryside. Vineyards crawl up hillsides, their leaves glistening in morning dew. Farmers bend low, tying vines, with strips of cloth, their dogs watching from the edges of fields. The scene is quiet, domestic. For a moment you wonder why anyone would leave this for deserts and mountains. But then you remember wealth, adventure, and maybe the chance to write yourself into history. A quirky tidbit slips into your thoughts, travelers. In this era, sometimes brought along portable tables, not the folding plastic kind, but flat wooden planks, to lay across saddlebags, creating a makeshift desk. Imagine setting one of those down in the dirt and scratching notes with ink that smudges the moment you sneeze. You'll be lucky if your own notes don't blur into nonsense by the time you reach Persia. By midday, the sun has burned away the mist. Heat presses against your shoulders, sweat trickling down your back. The cloak that kept you warm last night now feels like a curse. You tug at it, but know better than to discard it. You'll need it when night comes cold again. This is the rhythm of travel, too hot by day, too cold by night, never just right. A small caravan joins your path, 3 camels led by men in striped tunics. Their beasts groan and sway, each step deliberate. The camels eye you with a look somewhere between disdain and boredom. They're carrying bolts of cloth jars of oil bundles of dried herbs. You realize how pitiful your own supplies look in comparison. Yet for all their grandeur, you note how often the traders pause to check straps, adjust loads, and scold the animals. Even the best-packed caravan is always on the edge of chaos. The road crests a hill. From the top, you catch sight of the Adriatic, glinting in the distance blue and endless. Beyond it lies Venice, already shrinking in memory. Ahead lies Constantinople, the next great marker on this impossible journey. Between here and there, days of mud hunger and aching legs. You inhale, steady yourself, and step forward. Evening approaches. A village welcomes you with the smell of bread baking in clay ovens. Children run barefoot, chasing chickens across a dusty square. The locals eye you, curiously whispering behind hands. You're strangers here, and strangers are always suspicious. Your uncle produces a coin, slips it into a baker's palm, and soon you're chewing coarse bread, its crust hard enough to chip a tooth. Still, hunger makes it taste divine. As darkness falls, you unfurl your first camp on the road. A blanket laid over grass, your cloak pulled tight, a small fire sputtering as twigs crackle. Stars blink awake one by one. You think of the soft beds of Venice, the warmth of home, the mosaics of St. Mark's. Then you glance at the horizon, an expanse of blackness that promises more than comfort ever could. Sleep comes slowly. Your back aches. Your stomach twists with nerves. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks. Farther off, you hear the lonely clang of a cowbell. You stare at the sky until your eyes blur, whispering to yourself that tomorrow you'll take one more step and then another until even the idea of home is something you can't quite picture anymore. The road to the east has begun to swallow you. You rise stiff and creaking dew clinging to your cloak, like a damp curse. The fire has burned to gray ash, and the bread crust you gnawed before sleep now feels like sand in your teeth. The road awaits, stretching on like a dare. This section of the journey isn't about glamour. It's about slogging through mud dust and more mud. Your pack is lighter than the caravan's crates, but it still gnaws at your shoulders. A leather flask bounces against your hip, filled with water that tastes faintly of iron. Every sip feels both necessary and disappointing. You begin to understand why water was never taken for granted in this world. It could keep you alive, but rarely made you happy. The terrain shifts to farmland patched with barley and oats. Men swing scythes in wide arcs, rhythm steady as a drum. The stalks fall in waves, piling into bundles tied with twine. Children chase after dropped grain, scooping it up in aprons. Your own steps crunch against husks scattered along the road. You imagine the long haul, east-endless meals of bread, maybe a lucky turnip or onion thrown in. Fine dining isn't exactly on the Silk Route's menu. A mainstream fact echoes in your mind. Marco Polo wasn't the first European to make this trek. Merchants had been shuffling east for generations, their tales growing taller with every retelling. Still, he became the most famous, partly because he bothered to write, or rather dictate about it later. You, of course, are just trying to survive long enough to avoid becoming a forgotten skeleton by the roadside. As you pass through a village, you notice an odd little structure, a covered trough carved from stone set right by the square. Travelers stop to water their animals, while locals refill buckets. A quirky tidbit, some medieval villages had bylaws about how long a stranger could let his horse drink. Hogging the trough could earn you a fine, or worse, a shove into the muck by impatient farmers. You wisely move on, before testing anyone's patience. The path narrows into wood shadow pooling beneath oak and chestnut. The air smells damp, earthy, alive. You hear the clatter of woodpeckers, the chatter of unseen birds. Sunlight filters in broken beams, gilding leaves in soft light. It feels almost holy until the ground grabs your boot with a sucking squelch. You lurch forward, pulling free, with a sound disturbingly like a giant slurping soup. Mud, the eternal travel companion. By midday, sweat trickles under your cloak. The road tilts upward hills, rolling like waves. A mule brays in protest as it's whipped up the incline. You glance at your uncle, his brow shining, lips pressed tight. He's older, but his endurance shames you. He walks as if the hills are minor inconveniences, while your lungs burn like bellows. You mutter something about medieval fitness regimes being criminally underrated. At a ridge you rest and look back. The view stretches far fields, patchworked in greens and golds smoke, curling from distant chimneys. You wonder if you'll ever see this place again. Travel isn't about loops. It's a one-way march into the unknown. Historians still argue whether Polo's family really believed they'd return at all, or if they packed for a permanent exile dressed up as trade. That uncertainty hums in your ears now. Descending, you pass a cluster of shepherds, guiding sheep with whistles and sticks. The animals bleat like a choir that never rehearsed. A boy, carrying a wicker basket of cheese, trots past grinning. You envy him. His world is contained simple, measured by pastures and seasons. Yours, by contrast, is stretched across continents, tangled in ambition too large to hold. By late afternoon, clouds gather, the sky bruises purple-gray thunder, muttering in the distance, and a storm rolls in, sudden and merciless. Rain slams down cold needles against your skin. The road becomes a river of muck. You clutch your pack tighter, praying the parchment inside doesn't melt into illegible mush. Your cloak, once heavy with warmth, now clings like a soaked rag. Welcome to travel. You're always too wet, too dry, too hot, or too cold. Never just right. You stumble into a way station, a long barn with half a roof. Others huddle there, a trader with soaked bolts of cloth, a farmer gripping his hat, two monks whose faces shine with serene indifference, as though rain were just another blessing. You collapse against a post dripping. For a moment, no one speaks. Only the rain drums on the roof. Then, as if by secret agreement, everyone sighs at once, releasing the day's misery in one communal exhale. When the storm passes, the air is fresh sharp. Puddles mirror the last pink smear of sunset. You trudge out, clothes still wet but spirits oddly lighter. The road gleams like a ribbon under the fading light. Fireflies flicker at the edges of fields, tiny lanterns guiding you on. That night, you lay your cloak on damp grass. Your uncle mutters about ruined boots, while you wring water from your sleeves. Above, stars punch through clearing skies, brilliant and cold. You trace their patterns, wondering if these same constellations will follow you all the way to Cathay. Maybe they're the only companions who won't abandon you, won't argue, won't demand tolls or taxes. Silent, patient, eternal. As your eyelids droop, you make a half joke to yourself. If you survive the Silk Routes, maybe you'll start a travel blog. You know, top 10 medieval hacks for wet boots. Unfortunately, without Wi-Fi, you'll just have to keep muttering into the night air. And with that ridiculous thought, you finally drift off while frogs croak lullabies from the puddles nearby. Morning breaks with the kind of sting only damp clothes can deliver. Your tunic is still clinging like a needy lover, and the smell, half mildew, half regret, makes you wonder if ancient travel was secretly a test in masochism. You pull on your boots, stiff with yesterday's mud, and swear softly under your breath. No one in this caravan looks particularly glamorous, but at least your uncle still manages to keep his cloak folded, just so, as if presentation alone could convince the world he's destined for greatness. The road turns eastward, weaving past villages where smoke curls gently from low-roofed houses. The scent of baking barley bread floats in the air, warm and comforting. Your stomach growls loudly enough that a passing goat stares at you unimpressed. You shift your pack, the leather creaking, and wonder how much longer until a proper meal. Sadly, proper in this context usually means something involving porridge onions and a suspiciously chewy bit of meat that could be goat sheep or, for all you know, someone's retired pack mule. Along the way, you notice stone markers at the edge of the road, weathered by rain and years. A mainstream fact slides into your thoughts. Medieval roads often had way markers, sometimes showing distances, sometimes just carved with symbols, so that even the illiterate could follow. They're less like highway signs and more like the medieval equivalent of, yes, you're still on the right road, congratulations. Your group joins a slow-moving caravan carrying bolts of wool wrapped in rough cloth. The smell of lanolin clings to the air sheep grease that repels water, but also gives everything an earthy tang. A merchant beside you brags about the quality of his wool, gesturing dramatically with a walking stick. A quirky tidbit pops to mind. Some merchants rubbed garlic on their goods before traveling, believing the smell would ward off moths and thieves alike. You sniff discreetly, half worried this fellow actually did that. The hours drag. Hills rise and fall. Streams sparkle as you ford them water, soaking into your boots all over again. You try to distract yourself by counting birds. Ravens, sparrows, one startling flash of a kingfisher darting blue across the water. Nature seems immune to your discomfort, showing off as though the world were one endless stage play. By midday, your caravan stops at a small town pressed against a hill. Narrow lanes twist between timbered houses, and the square buzzes with activity. Vendors sell pottery dried figs, and most enticing of all, fresh bread, steaming from ovens. You cave instantly, trading a copper coin for a loaf, still warm enough to burn your fingers. Tearing it open, you savor the steam and the nutty tang of coarse flour. You don't care if the crust scrapes your gums. This is bliss. While eating, you notice the town fountain, a carved lion head, spitting water into a stone basin. Children laugh as they splash, while women fill jugs, balancing them with practiced grace. You think again of cleanliness, of how water was always more than thirst. Ritual purity, survival. It all ties back to the same lifeblood. Historians still argue whether towns like these cared more about sanitation or symbolism, whether fountains were practical utilities or declarations of civic pride. You just know the water tastes fresher than anything in your leather flask. Leaving town, the road broadens into open fields. Farmers bend under the sun, guiding plows pulled by oxen. You wave to a boy driving geese with a stick, his bare feet caked in mud. The geese hiss back, unimpressed. For a moment, you wonder what life would be like if you had never left steady-rooted, measured in seasons instead of miles. Then your uncle strides ahead, calling you to keep up. That thought fades. By late afternoon, you approach a monastery perched on a rise. Bells toll in the distance, a solemn grounding rhythm. You're granted lodging for the night, bare straw mattresses, but better than grass. The monks welcome you with bowls of lentil stew and hunks of black bread. The stew is thick, earthy, dotted with carrots, and though it tastes suspiciously like boiled mud, you eat every spoonful gratefully. A monk shows you their scriptorium, lit by thin shafts of fading sunlight. Rows of books line the shelves, vellum pages inked with Latin, careful brown outlines, gilded initials. You trail your fingers along the spines, awed. A flicker of envy stirs. These men spend their lives copying, illuminating, preserving. No mud, no blisters, no endless marching, just quills and quiet. Yet you also sense their world is no less demanding. It's simply labor of a different flavor. At night you lie in the dormitory, the sound of snores mingling with the soft coo of doves in the rafters. The faint smell of beeswax from nearby candles lingers in the air. Sleep pulls at you, but your mind drills. You imagine Marco Polo himself, younger than you, perhaps, trudging roads much like these, half cursing, half dreaming. Did he complain about wet boots too? Probably. Some miseries are timeless. You drift off mumbling a joke to yourself. Maybe the real Silk Road treasure was the bread we tore along the way. No one laughs. Of course, the monks are fast asleep. But you chuckle anyway, letting the sound dissolve into the darkness. Dawn slips through the monastery's narrow windows, pale light stretching across the dormitory floor. You groan, brushing straw from your hair, and tug your boots back on still damp, because apparently leather enjoys eternal dampness. Breakfast is porridge, predictably lumpy, flavored faintly with smoke. You stir it half-heartedly, watching the monks move in practiced silence. For them, each gesture is ritual, a rhythm older than memory. For you, it's another reminder that this journey runs on both patience and porridge. Leaving the monastery, the road descends into valleys, where vineyards stripe the hillsides. The morning air is cool, carrying the tang of crushed grapes. Vintners in russet tunics tend the vines, pruning carefully with small knives. You hear laughter from a group of children chasing each other, with baskets pretending to pick grapes. One of them nearly barrels into you eyes wide before darting off again. You smile despite yourself. Some games never change, whether in Europe or far along the Silk routes. By midday, the caravan halts at a river crossing. The water glints wide and slow, with reeds rustling at the banks. A ferry waits little more than a flat raft of planks, guided by ropes strung from shore to shore. You clamber aboard, clutching your pack tightly as the raft wobbles. Your uncle mutters about trusting his life to wet timber and stubborn rope. He's not wrong. The current tugs the ferry groans, and you imagine the splash you'd make if the whole contraption collapsed. Probably louder than your dignity could handle. Halfway across, you notice merchants haggling even here. One man pulls from his basket a bundle of dried herbs, waving them under another's nose. The sharp medicinal smell catches your throat. A mainstream fact pops up: travelers often carried herbs as both trade goods and rudimentary medicine, since pharmacies were rare and illnesses plentiful. A sprig of sage could mean the difference between profit and plague. On the far bank, you disembark into a bustling market town. The square bursts with noise vendors crying out, donkeys braying, pots clanging. Stalls overflow with goods: coarse salt in wicker baskets, iron nails in little heaps, rolls of dyed cloth in indigo and saffron. You brush past a stand selling honeycombs dripping golden and sticky. The vendor grins, pressing a sliver into your palm. Sweetness explodes on your tongue, sharp and floral enough to make you forget your sore feet. Wandering the market, you notice charms tied to poles, small carved figures of wood and bone. A quirky tidbit slips in: some medieval travelers believed carrying amulets carved with runes could ward off blisters or evil spirits. You glance at your raw heels and wonder if you should have invested in one. Instead, you settle for buying a small pouch of almonds. Not magical, but at least edible. You pause at a blacksmith's stall, sparks flying as hammer meets anvil. The ringing rhythm echoes through the square. The blacksmith wipes sweat from his brow, his forearms slick with effort. Tools line the table: knives, chisels, horseshoes, all smelling of iron and heat. You realize that even here, far from any palace, the hum of trade is constant, relentless. Every hammer strike feels like part of the Silk Road's heartbeat. Historians still argue whether markets like these were primarily local exchanges or vital links in global trade webs. You suspect both, and your stomach suggests you stop thinking so hard about it. After trading a few copper coins for dried figs, you drift back to the caravan. Your uncle has acquired a jug of cheap wine and is already boasting about its vintage. You sip politely, and it tastes suspiciously like vinegar with ambitions. Still, it warms your chest, so you don't complain. By evening, the caravan presses on. The road narrows into rocky hills, shadows lengthening, as the sun dips low. You pass shrines tucked into niches along the pathstone altars with little offerings of bread coins and faded flowers. Travelers kneel briefly muttering prayers. You imitate them clumsily, not quite sure what god you're addressing. Probably the god of not breaking an ankle. When camp is set, fires flicker under the stars. Smoke rises into the night, carrying the smell of roasted chickpeas. Someone strums a lute, the notes wandering lazily through the darkness. You sit cross-legged, chewing almonds and watching sparks drift upward. The conversation is half gossip, half tall tales. One man insists he saw a phoenix feather, once traded for it in Antioch. Another swears the Chinese emperor bathes daily in powdered pearls. You roll your eyes, but secretly you savor the absurdity it passes the time. Later, as you curl under your cloak, the stars stretch endless, above sharp as pinpricks. The wind whistles faintly through the rocks. You think about the miles behind, the miles ahead, and the simple truth that this road will not end soon. Your body aches, but there's a rhythm to it. Now steps, meals, sleep, repeat. A cycle like laundry in the Nile, like vineyards in the valley, like stars wheeling overhead. You chuckle softly, whispering a joke into the night. Maybe if you survive this trip, your epitaph will read, "Here lies the traveler who never dried his boots." It's grimly funny, and the wind seems to laugh back, rustling the grass. Sleep takes you before you finish the thought. Morning breaks with the dull clang of iron bells from a chapel perched on a hillside. The sound rolls across the valley, stirring birds from the trees, and groans from your fellow travelers. You blink awake, throat-dry lips tasting of dust and last night's vinegar wine. Rolling up your blanket, you notice dew beading on your boots. Not enough to clean them, just enough to make your socks feel like wet parchment when you slip them on. Some luxuries never quite arrive. The caravan creeps along a road cut into the side of a hill, with steep drop to your right and rising stone wall to your left. Goats clamber on ledges, bleating as if mocking your nervous balance. A mule slips slightly on the gravel, sending your heart leaping but recovers. You make a mental note, don't trust mules, cliffs, or your own sense of dignity. By midday, the road widens into a stretch of flatlands dotted with farmsteads. Fields of barley ripple under the wind, golden against the blue sky. Peasants in teal and russet tunics bend low scythes flashing. A mainstream fact drifts into your mind. Barley wasn't just for bread. It fueled most beer brewing in medieval Europe. And beer was safer to drink than much of the water. You glance at your water skin suspiciously, then take a swig anyway. Lukewarm and slightly metallic, but no worse than the wine. Near the fields, you spot scarecrows draped in old cloaks, straw arms raised as if in warning. A quirky tidbit surfaces some villages believed scarecrows not only kept birds away, but also frightened wandering spirits. Those little nuisances that slipped between worlds. You wonder whether spirits laugh at straw hats the same way crows do. In the next village, the caravan halts. You shuffle through narrow lanes where houses huddle close, their walls timbered and plastered, their windows tiny. The air smells of smoke and stew. Children peer from doorways, whispering and giggling at your travel-worn clothes. You attempt a wave. One girl bursts into laughter so intense, she drops her wooden doll. Congratulations, you've just been out-charmed by a stick with yarn hair. At the village square, a small fountain trickles its water, darkened by coins glinting at the bottom. Villagers toss in offerings, muttering wishes. You consider pitching a copper yourself, but then recall your dwindling purse, and decide wishes are free to think, but expensive to act. Historians still argue whether such fountains were practical watering places first and sacred later, or vice versa. Either way, it feels like the village breathes through this little spring, steady and unassuming. Lunch is served under a linden tree flatbread warm from an oven cheese sharp enough to bite back, and a stew that tastes suspiciously like everything left in a pot since Easter. You eat anyway, grateful for heat and salt. Bees hum in the branches above, indifferent to your chewing. One stings a donkey's ear, sending the animal into a brief tantrum. The spectacle is almost worth the stew. Your uncle conducts a bit of business with local weavers. Their loom clacks steadily, threads weaving teal and indigo cloth. The women at the loom barely glance up, hands a blur of muscle memory. You trace the fabric with your fingers, impressed by its smoothness. Silk may lie far ahead, but even here the rhythm of warp and weft binds the road together. As evening nears, the caravan presses onward. The land flattens into meadow with willows shading a stream. A camp is pitched beside it, and you wash dust from your face in the cold current. The water smells of iron and grass. You catch your reflection, tired eyes, sunburnt nose, hair tangled like brambles. You sigh, thinking even scarecrows might laugh. The night meal is simple lentils simmered in a cauldron, a handful of figs shared around. A merchant tells a story about a monastery up north that swears by a recipe of beer brewed with nettles. You nearly choke laughing because it sounds like punishment, disguised as refreshment. Another traveler insists nettle beer cures joint pain. You file that away under things I'd rather never test. As stars rise, fires flicker. Voices drift softer. You lie back in the grass, tracing constellations with a finger. The Milky Way stretches pale across the sky, a river of light echoing the road you follow. You muse aloud that perhaps it's the god's own silk road above guiding you eastward. Your uncle grunts unimpressed and rolls over, but you feel something stirring a quiet certainty that the road itself is alive, pulsing with centuries of footsteps, trades, prayers, and jokes told over stew. You fall asleep with barley fields still in your nose, scarecrows standing like silent guardians in your dreams. The road rises again as dawn stretches pale ribbons across the sky. You wake to the creak of carts and the low murmur of voices, shoulders, stiff from sleeping on uneven ground. Your blanket smells faintly of smoke and sheep, an aroma you've grown accustomed to, though you'd never admit it to anyone hoping for romance on the Silk Road. You chew on a crust of yesterday's bread teeth, grinding against seeds stubborn as gravel, and begin the day's walk. By mid-morning, the caravan comes upon a fortified town, its walls high and rough-hewn gates, reinforced with iron studs. Guards in russet cloaks stand watch spears in hand, their eyes sharp with suspicion. You shuffle forward trying to look harmless, though you realize your dusty hair and wild beard make you resemble more of a bandit than a traitor. One guard grunts, then waves you through. You exhale. In relief, entry taxes are brutal, and you're not in the mood to haggle over copper coins. Inside the town hums with a rhythm different from the open road. Market stalls line the streets, their awnings striped in saffron and teal. Merchants call out, displaying bolts of wool jars of honey, baskets of onions, and the occasional trinket that looks suspiciously looted. The air tastes of sweat, frying fish, and manure, all baked under a noon sun that doesn't care for your comfort. You find yourself pausing at a stall, selling bronze weights and scales. Mainstream history, fact-standardized weights were crucial to medieval trade, ensuring that merchants didn't shave a little off each measure to cheat buyers. The stallkeeper rattles on about his perfectly balanced set, lifting one weight after another, until you almost believe this scale could solve all the world's dishonesty. Almost. At a corner, you stumble upon a curiosity, a tiny booth, where a man claims to sell charms that ward off fleas. He waves a pouch of dried herbs, promising miraculous relief. The fringe tidbit here. Some medieval folks did believe in carrying fragrant herbs, or even wearing flea-repellent amulets, though whether fleas ever respected herbs is doubtful. You imagine fleas laughing as they hop from cloak to cloak, but the merchant insists he hasn't been bitten in months. His scratching hand tells another story. In the square, a small crowd gathers around a storyteller perched on a barrel. His voice rises and falls like a chant, recounting tales of Alexander the Great, marching across the world. Children gape mouths sticky with figs. A dog barks at the storyteller's gesturing hands. You catch yourself smiling. Stories bind towns as much as walls and gates. Historians still argue whether these public storytellers preserved history or twisted it into entertainment. Maybe both. You're just grateful for a distraction from your aching feet. Lunch comes cheap, a bowl of millet porridge with onions. You sit on a low step, spooning the warm mush into your mouth, while trying not to notice the chicken pecking at your toes. The taste is bland, but the heat comforts your stomach. Beside you, a woman balances a wicker basket of laundry on her head, moving with the grace of someone who's done it 1,000 times. You think of your own crumpled garments stuffed in a sack and sigh. Maybe fleas would respect you more if you did laundry occasionally. Your uncle disappears into a tavern to strike deals, leaving you to wander. You peek into a church at the edge of town. Candles flicker against frescoes of saints. Their faces long and solemn. Their robes painted in indigo and gold leaf. The air is thick with incense, its smoke curling like ghostly fingers. For a moment, you feel the hush settle over you, soft and cool. Outside, life is noise and barter. Inside, silence feels heavy enough to press against your chest. When evening comes, the caravan gathers in the inn's yard. Wooden benches creak under the weight of travelers slumped with weariness. A meal of beans and bread is shared, the bread still warm, the beans surprisingly peppery. A juggler entertains with knives narrowly missing his ear, once earning nervous laughter. You sip watered wine and pretend your own life isn't just as precarious. The inn's sleeping quarters are communal straw mats, lined shoulder to shoulder. You squeeze between two snoring strangers, the smell of garlic and sweat wafting thick. You lie staring at the rafters, watching shadows sway from the lantern light. Somewhere below, a lute plays muffled but steady strings, plucked in a lullaby for weary bones. As sleep pulls at you, you realize towns like this are more than waypoints. They're small worlds unto themselves, each one alive with commerce, gossip, superstition, and song. You drift off, wondering whether centuries from now, someone will still tell stories of Alexander, still believe herbs can chase away fleas, still weigh honesty on a pair of balanced scales. Morning unfurls again this time, with the sound of hooves and the hiss of wind over stone. You've left the town behind its walls, shrinking into the distance, and the caravan pushes toward a stretch of desert that seems to stretch forever. The ground crunches underfoot dry and brittle, while the air smells faintly of dust and roasted earth. Your tongue feels like leather even before the sun climbs high. You keep glancing at your water skin, pathetically light in your hand, and hope the next oasis isn't just a rumor. The road becomes less a road and more a suggestion, a faint track marked by the grooves of older wheels. Caravan leaders squint toward the horizon, reading subtle signs, the angle of dunes, the line of distant hills, that you completely miss. You mostly try to keep your sandals from filling with grit, a losing battle. By noon, you're half convinced the sun is personally offended by your existence. Then a shimmer appears on the horizon. At first, it's another mirage. Your eyes have been tricked. Plenty already, but this shimmer grows, resolving into a stand of palms and a glittering pool. Relief floods you so quickly that you almost break into a jog. The caravan surges forward, and soon you're kneeling at the edge of the water, cupping handfuls into your mouth. It's warm, slightly brackish, but it might as well be nectar. The oasis is more than water. Traders know this oases are lifelines, serving as meeting points and trading hubs. Mainstream fact entire settlements often grew around oases, thriving on passing caravans that depended on their wells. Here, date palms rustle their fronds, whispering in the wind, and you chew sticky sweet fruit until your fingers are tacky. Camels kneel in the shade, their grunts low, and rumbling like complaints in an ancient tongue. A fringe tidbit greets you in the form of a local herder who insists his goats drink better water when blessed with a whispered charm. He demonstrates muttering at the well while his animals lap it up. You can't taste any difference, but the man swears by it, patting the goat's head with solemn pride. Part of you wonders if the goats are simply humoring him. The afternoon stretches lazily. Some travelers nap under palms, their snores blending with the buzzing of insects. Others strike up hasty trades, salt for raisins, copper for wool. You catch snippets of gossip, rumors of Mongol patrols, whispers of new routes being opened, tales of entire caravans, swallowed by shifting dunes. Historians still argue whether the Mongols improved Silk Road safety by enforcing order or made it worse by constant warfare. You figure both can be true depending on who's telling the story. Later, a caravan cook boils a pot of barley gruel. You watch the steam rise, the smell earthy and faintly nutty. It sticks to your ribs just enough to keep despair at bay. Beside you, a boy crushes desert herbs between his fingers, releasing a sharp minty scent. He presses some into your hand, insisting it'll keep scorpions away from your bedroll tonight. You thank him, though you suspect scorpions haven't read the memo. Evening drapes itself across the oasis, violet fading into deep indigo. A fire crackles sparks, climbing toward the stars. You recline on a rolled cloak belly, full eyes fixed on the sky. It's astonishing so many stars that the night feels alive, a giant woven carpet overhead. Someone hums a tune low and wavering, while another taps a drum with a rhythm older than any road. In the firelight, your uncle digs through the chest of supplies, checking and rechecking. Salt bricks glimmer faintly. Silk rolls are wrapped tightly protected from sand. He mutters about weighing them tomorrow, just to be certain no thief or cousin has skimmed a corner. You roll your eyes, but secretly admire his vigilance. A caravan lives and dies by its supplies. Sleep comes slowly interrupted by camel groans, and the occasional yip of a jackal in the distance. The ground is cool beneath your mat, though you tuck your cloak around you tightly. You close your eyes with the taste of dates still on your tongue, listening to the fire die down into embers. For now, the desert is kind. For now, the oasis has offered its gift. You wonder how many travelers before you knelt at this same pool, tasting the same brackish water, whispering the same thanks to stars that never tire of watching. The dawn creeps over the dunes, painting them pink and gold, and you rub the grit from your eyes, half asleep, half certain you dreamed the oasis entirely. But the sticky traces of date syrup on your fingers prove otherwise. Camels are already groaning as their loaded bags of salt creaking against leather straps, and you can't help but feel each grunt mirrors your own mood. Another day, another trudge, another endless horizon. Salt, what a strange treasure. Your uncle pats a block, reverently, as though it were silver. In truth, it's worth nearly that. Mainstream, fact salt caravans cross the Sahara and Central Asia, hauling heavy white bricks that were literally currency in some places. Imagine dragging 50 pounds of sweaty rocks across a desert and then proudly calling them money. Still, you know why it matters. Without salt, food spoils, bodies weaken, lives shorten. In short, no salt, no survival. By mid-morning, your tongue is already dry again, but a line of camels reminds you of the absurdity of your situation. They seem to smirk with their long-lashed eyes, as if to say, you brought salt into a desert-bold strategy. You laugh out loud, startling a camel that retaliates with a wet sneeze directly on your sleeve. Congratulations, you've been officially baptized by caravan life. At midday, you stop near a stony rise where shade is thin and brittle. Someone unwraps dried figs, passing them around like gold coins. The sugar sticks to your teeth, but the taste lingers just long enough to dull hunger. Salt bricks are stacked neatly beside the caravan, a mini fortress of shimmering white, their surfaces already crusted with sand. A fringe tidbit makes its way into conversation. Some merchants believed salt carried protective magic, warding off evil spirits if sprinkled around a campfire. You half expect your uncle to circle the fire tonight with salt grains, like some medieval ghostbuster. As the afternoon sun beats down, shadows shrink until they nearly vanish. The desert hums with silence so loud it presses against your ears. You wonder how many travelers have simply lain down here, lulled by that silence, never to rise again. Historians still argue whether the majority of salt caravans preferred night travel to avoid such punishing heat, or, if that's just a romantic exaggeration, by chroniclers who never left their libraries. Either way, you're stuck in the middle of the day trudging like a roasted beetle under the sky's magnifying glass. You pass a skeleton of some unfortunate camel, its bones bleached white scattered like puzzle pieces across the sand. Someone cracks a joke about it being a warning sign, but no one laughs too loudly. You silently pat your own camel, muttering encouragement. You're not sure either of you believes. The beast belches in reply. Comforting. Evening finally approaches a long sigh of relief across the camp. Fires crackle again, but tonight, instead of date palms, you are surrounded by bare dunes that shift and whisper in the wind. The salt is stacked close to the fire, as though its value demands warmth. You sit beside it, the bricks glowing faintly orange in the flames, and for a strange moment, you think they look almost edible, giant, savory marshmallows. You wisely resist the urge. Dinner is a thin broth, salted just enough to trick your tongue into believing it's a feast. You sip it slowly, savoring every grain. Around you, the caravan murmurs stories. A trader claims he once saw a block of salt traded straight for a bolt of Chinese silk. Another insists salt cured his aching joints when rubbed on his knees. You picture him shuffling through a spa treatment in the middle of the desert, attendants dutifully sprinkling salt on him like seasoning a roast chicken. Night deepens. Stars unfurl again, brighter than anything you've ever seen, and the air cools so quickly you hug your cloak tight. You lie beside the salt pile, the blocks, exhaling a faint mineral tang. Strange comfort, this wall of white treasure, but it makes you feel safe, like sleeping beside a chest of coins. You close your eyes and imagine waking to find the pile gone stolen in the night. The thought rattles you, though exhaustion drags you down before panic can take root. And so you drift off, tucked between dunes and bricks of crystallized necessity, realizing that sometimes the most precious possessions aren't golden idols or jeweled crowns, but slabs of plain, unglamorous rock, white, heavy, salty, and absolutely indispensable. Morning brings no gentle easing into the day, only the sharp whistle of the caravan leader and the dry thud of hooves shifting restlessly. You blink awake, sand stuck to your eyelashes, your tongue clinging to the roof of your mouth as if it were trying to escape. Breakfast is a small hunk of bread, rubbed with oil, more crumb than loaf, but you chew slowly, pretending it's a royal banquet. At least there's water carefully rationed in goatskin bags that squeak like angry balloons when squeezed. The desert stretches ahead, but today you notice how the air feels different. Lighter, drier, and carrying with it a faint metallic tang. Someone mutters that this is caravan fatigue, the nose inventing scents, where none exist, the body tricking you with mirages. But soon you see what's real, shimmering pools of heat quivering on the horizon. They look like lakes until you walk closer, and they vanish, leaving only sand. Joke number one of the day: you declare you'll build a seaside villa out here, complete with a camel-shaped lifeguard. No one laughs. Perhaps the humor dries up faster than water. The path winds along a ridge where dunes roll endlessly, their crests sharp like frozen waves. Camels grunt and sway sometimes, stepping sideways as though they too question the sanity of climbing sand hills. By midday, You stop near a rocky outcrop, a rare gift of shade. There, your uncle checks the salt bricks, ensuring they're not crumbling from humidity. You smirk. What humidity? You're convinced the air here could dry laundry in 2 seconds flat. Still, the blocks gleam faintly, their crystalline faces catching bits of sunlight like tiny mirrors. Mainstream fact across Central Asia, caravans didn't just carry salt, but also spices, silk, and sometimes living animals like falcons or exotic horses. Salt, however, was so crucial that entire routes were called salt roads. You picture a map scribbled with glowing lines of white like veins across the desert body. As the caravan rests, someone pulls out a stringed instrument, a rabab, and plucks a sleepy tune. You lean back, eyes half shut, imagining you're floating down the Nile again. A quirky tidbit surfaces in conversation. Some travelers swore that listening to music while walking the dunes made camels step more rhythmically, almost like dancers in procession. You glance at the beasts swaying in time with the plucked notes, and sure enough, they look like ungainly ballerinas, each heavy step landing with comedic grace. The afternoon is a furnace, the sand radiates upward, cooking your ankles even through leather sandals. The caravan moves in near silence, breaths, measured voices, swallowed by the heat. You notice the fabric of your indigo tunic stiffening with salt from your own sweat. Perhaps you're becoming a salt brick yourself, destined to be traded in some faraway bazaar. Joke number 2. You announce to your uncle that you'll list yourself as rarely used high in sodium when sold. He mutters back that no one would pay more than 2 figs. By late day, the sun finally dips lower casting dunes in long shadows that ripple like black silk. The wind picks up, carrying fine grains that sting your cheeks. You wrap your saffron scarf around your mouth, peeking out with narrowed eyes. Sandstorm whispers echo through the caravan historians. Still argue whether ancient caravans truly dreaded sandstorms, as much as accounts describe, or if later writers exaggerated to heighten drama. You personally find even this light stinging miserable enough, so you'd happily side with the dramatists. Camp tonight forms in the lee of a dune shields, erected with blankets stretched between stakes. Fires sputter against the wind embers chased quickly into the dark. You eat lentils salted to near immortality, spooning them slowly from a clay pot. The taste is sharp, briny, oddly comforting after the day's monotony. Stories swirl again. One merchant swears he saw a mirage that turned out to be an abandoned city swallowed by sand. Another insists camels can smell water 3 days away. You roll your eyes, but secretly hope the second story is true. Imagine a camel with a built-in water GP. Now that's an invention worth patenting. Joke number 3, you suggest training camels to act as weather forecasters. Someone replies that they already do by spitting when rain's unlikely. Stars scatter overhead once more, clearer than glass. You lie on your back, hands tucked under your head, and the salt pile again looms nearby your nightly fortress. The wind hums low, and for the first time you realize how the rhythm of the caravan mimics your own heartbeat. Steady, trudging, relentless. Tomorrow more dunes, more salt, more steps. But for tonight, wrapped in russet blankets and laughter faint as the breeze, you surrender to the desert's lullaby. You wake to a chorus of camel complaints, the guttural groans, like a choir of grumpy old men demanding breakfast. The dawn is pale, washed in silver rather than gold, and the sand glitters faintly as though dusted with ground glass. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and realize your hair feels stiff with salt. Not sea salt glamour, just plain sweat and dust. Joke number 1 for the morning, you decide to market it as the newest desert hair gel, guaranteed to repel both water and human company. The caravan rolls out, and soon the dunes thin into a flatter plain of cracked clay. The ground is hard beneath your sandals, ridged with spiderweb patterns where water once lingered before surrendering to the sun. The air is cooler, here a relief, though the wind carries a faint bitterness. Your uncle mutters about alkaline soil, a phrase that sounds both scholarly and like something that might burn holes in your socks. A mainstream fact drifts through your mind. These routes weren't just lifelines for goods, but also for knowledge. Along with salt caravans, carried tales, technologies, even recipes, paper itself crept westward this way, carried by merchants like yours. You chew on the thought, imagining an ancient traveler, lugging a backpack filled only with blank notebooks. By midday, the caravan reaches a small oasis. Palms stand tall, their fronds wagging lazily like bored fans at a summer concert. A pool of water glimmers, ringed with reeds frogs, leaping with tiny splashes. The camels drink noisily, necks stretched like accordions, and you kneel by the water's edge. The first sip is heaven cool, earthy, a faint taste of silt. You splash your face, sending droplets sliding down your cheeks. For a brief moment, it feels like you've stepped out of the desert into paradise. Of course, paradise comes with chores. Salt bricks must be rewrapped, baskets mended, and saddles checked. You kneel beside a wicker basket, fingers working the reed strips back into place. A quirky tidbit surfaces: some caravans employed professional basket weavers who traveled alongside repairing gear constantly because sand wore down everything. You picture a guild of elite desert basket weavers competing for who could weave the tightest lid, like medieval sports heroes of storage solutions. Lunch is dates and nuts. Sticky sweetness coating your tongue, followed by flatbread, charred at the edges. You lean back under a palm tree, its shade speckled with sunlight, and listen to merchants argue over routes. One insists a northern pass is safer. Another warns of bandits there. Historians still argue whether caravans deliberately exaggerated dangers to keep rivals away, or if the tales of endless bandits are genuinely accurate. You shrug. Either way, your own sandals feel heavy enough to ward off intruders. In the afternoon, you push on past the oasis, stomach full, but heart reluctant to leave the green. The clay plain grows harsher, split into jagged ridges that make camels stumble. Dust devils whirl in the distance, thin spirals rising like ghosts. You tighten your scarf against the grid eyes squinting. Someone shouts and points a caravan in the distance, banners fluttering. As the two groups meet, there's cautious greetings, quick exchanges of news, and the familiar shuffle of trade. Salt bricks are inspected spices sniffed, and you watch the ritual unfold with half-amused awe, as though merchants are bees comparing pollen. Evening comes early shadows, stretching long over the plain. Camp is set against a low ridge, fires flickering like a row of patient eyes. Tonight's stew is richer flavored with cumin and coriander ingredients traded earlier. The fragrance fills the air, and you hum happily, spooning it into your mouth. Joke number 2. You solemnly declare you'll open a Michelin-starred restaurant here in the desert, specializing in sand reduction and camel latte froth. As night deepens, stars crowd the sky again, but tonight, a thin crescent moon hangs low, sharp as a sickle. You trace its glow against the salt bricks, stacked like sleeping beasts. The fire crackles, and travelers tell stories, some true, others fantastical. One man insists he saw a city where salt pillars glowed at night, guiding caravans like lanterns. Another describes a lake so salty that you could lie on it and float forever. You wonder if such places exist, or if they're just tales to distract from sore feet. Finally, wrapped in your indigo cloak, you lie down, belly warm, mind humming with the day's impressions. Joke number 3 sneaks in before sleep. You whisper to yourself that if camels truly can smell water, you'll invent the first camel sniff-based navigation app. Then the thought dissolves into drowsy laughter as you surrender to dreams beneath the crescent moon. The morning greets you with the soft bleating of goats instead of camel groans. And for a moment, you're confused. Did the caravan secretly trade all its camels overnight for something cuddlier? No, it's just a shepherd passing by with his flock. The animals, drifting like a woolly tide across the cracked earth. Their bells tinkle faintly, oddly soothing in the otherwise empty plain. Joke number 1 for today, you realize that goats are basically nature's alarm clocks, except they don't have snooze buttons, just insistent stares. The sun climbs pale and hesitant at first, before hardening into a white blaze overhead. You trudge forward, sandals scraping against soil that crunches like broken pottery. The merchants chatter to stay awake, voices weaving together into a patchwork of languages. You catch bits of Persian, snatches of Arabic, and the odd phrase in Mongolian, each word bouncing like stones across the caravan. A mainstream historical fact drifts through the Silk Routes. Were never a single path, but a vast web strands of languages and goods stretching across continents. You picture it like a massive spider's web, though less creepy and more likely to carry dried apricots. By midday, the caravan stops again, this time at a weathered outpost, a crumbling square building with walls of sun-baked mud brick. Its shade feels like stepping into another world. The cool air hugs your skin, and you sigh with relief. On one wall, faint painted designs remain swirls of red and blue, though faded by centuries. Merchants sit cross-legged, unpacking bundles. You notice how salt bricks are stacked neatly cloth, tied around them like gifts. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind. Some records suggest salt was even used as currency here, measured by weight, exchanged with the solemnity of coins. You can't help but imagine a medieval wallet stuffed with crumbling salt chunks, a messy nightmare every time you tried to pay for bread. You nibble on dried figs, their sweetness bursting against your tongue, and sip from a clay jug passed around. The conversation drifts to politics, rumors of new tolls on the northern routes, whispers of distant wars. Historians still argue whether these kinds of interruptions were the biggest reason for shifting trade patterns, or if climate changes, droughts, floods, shifting rivers played a greater role. Either way, you're grateful that today's biggest crisis seems to be whether the stew has enough onions. The afternoon is hotter, the light glaring so fiercely it makes the horizon quiver. Shadows vanish underfoot, leaving the world strangely flat. You keep moving, head bowed, cloak shielding your face. The land finally dips, revealing a narrow river valley, its banks lined with tamarisk trees. The sight of water again feels like stumbling into treasure. Children from a nearby village wave barefoot and laughing their clothes, bright splashes of saffron and teal. They run to greet the caravan, offering handfuls of herbs and clay jars of fresh milk. The exchange is quick salt for greens, cloth for jars. You chew a leaf offered to you, peppery sharp, waking your tongue after the monotony of bread. Evening arrives with pink light sliding across the sky, softening the edges of the ridge. Camp is made by the riverbank. You wash your face in the cool water, marveling at how it instantly changes your mood. You catch your reflection, hair wild, skin, dust-streaked eyes, a little too wide. Joke number 2. You decide this is the exact look that will dominate next year's fashion magazines. The caravan chic aesthetic, featuring sweat as the newest luxury. Dinner tonight is humble lentil stew again, with flatbread torn and dipped. But the conversation is richer. One merchant shares a story of traveling east, describing markets in Samarkand where blue tiles gleam like captured sky. Another swears he once saw snow falling in summer, carried on winds from distant mountains. You let the tales wash over you, half-truths, and wonder stitched together like patchwork cloth. Afterward, torches are lit, their flames fluttering in the breeze. You lie back on your cloak's stomach full and watch the sparks dance upward into the vast dark. The stars are sharp tonight, so clear you feel you could pluck them like beads. Someone nearby hums a tune low and steady, while the camels grunt sleepily. Joke number 3 drifts through your thoughts. Maybe one day you'll market camel snores as a relaxation soundtrack. Deep Desert Sleep Volume 1. The night is cooler here, the river whispering against its banks. You curl into your cloak, the weight of the day sinking into your bones. For a fleeting moment, you think about how laundry back in Egypt must still be drying in the night breeze. Even here, hundreds of miles away, the rhythm of simple tasks keeps the world moving. With that thought, you close your eyes, letting the hum of water and fire carry you into dreams. Dawn breaks like a slow exhale, pink and gold, spreading lazily across the horizon, and you wake to the smell of wood smoke and boiled grain. Your back aches a little from the hard ground, but there's comfort in the routine stretch. Rinse your face in the river, wrap your cloak tighter against the morning chill. The caravan is already stirring, merchants muttering as they pack baskets, camels grumbling as loads are heaved onto their backs. Joke number 1 presents itself. Camels are basically the grumpy co-workers of the animal world, always late, always complaining, but somehow indispensable. Today's path twists into a more rugged terrain. The smooth plains give way to a stony track that climbs slowly upward. The stones crunch beneath your sandals, each step uneven, forcing you to watch your footing. The air feels thinner, drier, with a faint metallic tang that makes you thirsty. Around you, the merchants adjust straps, tighten belts, mutter curses under their breath. Despite the effort, there's a quiet determination, like a group of students facing a long exam they didn't study for, but still know they'll somehow survive. By mid-morning, you come across a ruined watchtower, its base gnawed by centuries of wind. Only half of it stands now, leaning like an old tooth. But you can imagine the sentries who once stood here, scanning for bandits or rival caravans. A mainstream historical fact drifts in along the Silk routes. Countless forts and towers were built to protect merchants, part of vast networks of security that stretched across empires. Yet here this lonely relic seems forgotten, its stones home, only to lizards and nesting birds. The caravan halts briefly, and a few merchants duck inside the shade of the ruins. You follow, brushing away cobwebs to sit on the cool stone. A quirky tidbit bubbles up some accounts, suggest travelers along these routes carried small brass mirrors not for vanity, but to signal across distances with flashes of sunlight. You picture one of the guards here centuries ago blinking Morse code messages with nothing but sunlight and a piece of polished metal. Effective, yes, but also the medieval equivalent of texting you up. The road grows steeper. You feel sweat trickle down your spine, darkening the indigo of your tunic. Every step feels heavier, though the view makes up for it. The land unfurls beneath you, a vast stretch of plains dotted with tiny villages like scattered beads. You pause to catch your breath, and one of the merchants offers a handful of dried melon slices. They're chewy sweet, sticking to your teeth in the most satisfying way. By noon, the path levels into a high plateau where the wind rushes like an invisible river. Tents are pitched in a semicircle canvas, snapping in the gusts. Lunch is simple barley porridge, thickened with goat's milk but filling. You watch a few children chase each other, their laughter whipped away by the breeze. Historians still argue whether entire families traveled with caravans regularly, or if it was mostly hardened male traders. Some records suggest women and children were part of the moving community, weaving fabric, tending to animals, and even keeping accounts. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in between. Afternoon brings a different challenge. The plateau ends abruptly in a descent of jagged switchbacks, the kind that make you instinctively clutch at the camel's saddle horn and mutter prayers to any deity willing to listen. The path clings to the cliffside, dropping away into dizzying blue emptiness. Joke number 2 comes to you. If you ever wanted a natural roller coaster, this is it. Except there are no seatbelts, and the camel definitely didn't sign up for this ride. At last, the road spills into a hidden valley, surprisingly lush, with narrow streams threading between groves of date palms. Villagers approach with baskets of ripe fruit dates, sticky with syrup figs, split open like little jewels. The merchants trade cloth for food, and you greedily pop a fig into your mouth juice, dripping down your chin. Sweetness floods your senses, and you realize how profoundly fruit can taste when your tongue has been coated in dust all day. Evening settles quickly in the valley, the cliffs blocking much of the light. Fires are lit, sparks rising into the shadowed sky. Tonight's meal includes lamb stewed with onions. The smell so rich, it pulls you forward like a rope. You eat greedily, then lean back, listening, as one merchant sings a soft tune in Persian, his voice low and soothing. The song drifts upward, tangled with the smoke, carrying echoes of home. As the fire burns low, you lie back on your cloak, staring at the sliver of stars, visible between the cliffs. Joke number 3 surfaces as your eyelids grow heavy. You realize that if you ever write a travel review of the Silk Routes, you'll have to include the line 5 out of 5 stars would cross terrifying cliffs again. The valley hushes around you, the stream gurgling softly, the camels shifting in their sleep. You drift off with the taste of figs still lingering on your tongue, and the faint tune of the Persian song echoing in your ears. The valley wakes slowly, as though reluctant to give up the cool embrace of the night. You stir under your cloak, blinking at the pale light, filtering between the cliffs. Around you, the caravan is already in motion. Fires, rekindled kettles, steaming merchants, muttering like bees in their endless preparations. Your joints complain a little as you sit up, but you smile at the memory of figs and soft music. Joke number 1, sneaks and travel, is basically 10% adventure and 90% figuring out how to sleep on rocks without feeling like you've wrestled a goat all night. Breakfast is modest, a kind of flatbread torn apart and dipped into a thin lentil broth. You savor it anyway, noting how hunger has a way of making even the blandest meal feel like a feast. A merchant nearby shares a scrap of news rumors of a band of raiders seen 2 valleys away. Immediately, tension hums through the group. A mainstream historical fact slides in. Caravans often hired armed guards for protection, and many city-states along the Silk Routes provided patrols recognizing that safe trade was in everyone's economic interest. The image of guards trudging with spears feels comforting, though you can't shake the unease of unseen eyes. The caravan pushes forward, leaving the protective cliffs behind. The land opens again into rolling hills green, in places where streams cut through, but mostly dry and dotted with scrub. The path is less steep, but somehow lonelier, the horizon stretching into what feels like forever. You adjust your pack, tugging the strap to ease the pressure on your shoulder, and fall into the rhythmic trudge of boots on dust. By midday, you pass through a small village. Its houses are built of mud brick, clustered tightly together as though leaning on each other for support. Chickens scatter as the caravan winds through the narrow lane, and curious children peer from doorways. Some brave souls wave, and you wave back, grinning at the familiarity of human curiosity. A quirky tidbit pops up. Some travelers recorded that along the Silk Routes, villagers would carve simple signs into stones to guide caravans, little arrows, sometimes even crude animals, to indicate where water or pasture lay. You glance at the walls here, half expecting to find a doodle of a camel with an arrow pointing left. The caravan pauses to trade. You watch a sack of dried apricots exchange hands for bolts of cloth, the bright colors gleaming against the dusty backdrop. Historians still argue whether such trades were always equitable, or if villagers often felt exploited by the larger caravans passing through. There's no clear answer, but here, in this moment, the smiles and nods suggest mutual relief. Food for goods, goods for food, survival for all. The road stretches again. Heat rises in shimmering waves, and soon your tunic clings uncomfortably to your skin. A gust of wind carries the faint smell of dung, And sure enough, you spot a herd of goats, grazing on a nearby slope, watched over by a shepherd boy who whistles tunelessly. He raises a hand in greeting his shadow, long against the hillside, and for a moment you envy his simple circle of life: herd, pasture, water, repeat. Afternoon drags the sun merciless. You sip sparingly from your flask, every drop more precious than coins. At last, a cluster of trees appears in the distance, and the caravan veers gratefully toward them. Beneath their shade, you all collapse in various states of exhaustion. Bread and nuts are shared, and one merchant produces a tiny pouch of salt, sprinkling crystals onto slices of cucumber with exaggerated generosity. You chew slowly, the salt stinging your tongue, and laugh quietly at the show. Joke number 2 rises here. Apparently, no matter the century, there's always someone trying to make their lunch look like fine dining. As the day cools, the caravan presses on. The hills give way to a wide plain, where the grass sways in a constant whisper. You feel exposed out here, the horizon so bare, it seems like the earth itself has stretched thin. But the camels plod on, and eventually the smell of smoke carries on the wind. Ahead lies another trading post, this one sturdier, with a low wall circling its perimeter and a heavy wooden gate. The caravan files in, greeted by the chatter of other merchants, the clatter of pots, the unmistakable sound of someone arguing over prices. Relief washes through you. You've arrived somewhere with structure, with protection, with cooked food that doesn't require chewing for 20 minutes straight. Inside, you're drawn to the market stalls, tables heaped with spices that glitter like treasure. Cumin, cinnamon, peppercorns, scents that leap into your nose and stir half-forgotten cravings. You run your fingers over carved wooden spoons, marvel at glass beads that catch the firelight, and smile at the thought that somewhere months from now, these items will rest in homes thousands of miles away. Dinner is shared communally in the post's courtyard. Thick bread, roasted vegetables, lamb spiced with coriander. You sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers listening to the hum of overlapping conversations in half a dozen languages. The sense of community is almost intoxicating after so many lonely miles. A merchant leans over to tell a story of how, once in a storm, a camel carried an entire tent on its back and walked straight through the rain like a mobile shelter. You laugh, though part of you believes it. As night falls, mats are unrolled beneath the stars. The wall around the post feels like a warm embrace, keeping danger at bay. You settle into your cloak, eyes heavy, belly full. Joke number 3 ambles in. If Yelp existed, you'd give this trading post 5 stars for the lamb minus 1 star because the guy next to you snores like a broken water wheel. Sleep takes you gently, the sense of spice still lingering, the chatter fading into the hush of night. Tomorrow, the road will call again, but for now, you rest in the comfort of company and the quiet rhythm of safe passage. The sky is a vast sheet of velvet scattered with pinpricks of starlight. You stir awake before dawn, the trading post still cloaked in silence, save for the soft snorts of camels dreaming of endless pastures. You stretch, feeling the stiffness of another night, on a thin mat and listen to the faint crackle of embers, refusing to die in the fire pit. The guards shift at the gate, their spears gleaming faintly in the starshine. Joke number 1 tiptoes in. You realize guards are the only people less excited than camels to wake up this early. By the time the sun spills its first golden light over the horizon, the caravan is already bustling. Merchants wrap fabrics tight. Children chase each other with the last scraps of bread. And cooks stir steaming pots of millet porridge. You dip your wooden spoon into the thick mush flavored lightly with honey and let the sweetness linger. A mainstream historical fact surfaces here. Honey was not only a prized sweetener across the silk routes, but also used medicinally, believed to soothe coughs and heal wounds. You imagine jars of it, carefully wrapped in cloth, bouncing on camel saddles for miles. The road beckons once more, stretching ahead like a ribbon of dust. Leaving the safety of the post, you feel the familiar tug of both dread and wonder. Each step away from shelter is also a step deeper into discovery. The plain is wide, the air crisp, and the morning sun carries the promise of heat to come. Birds wheel overhead, their cries sharp against the endless silence. Midday finds you by a riverbank, where the caravan halts gratefully to water the animals. The river glimmers in the sunlight, cool and inviting, though the current swirls deceptively fast. Some of the younger travelers splash their faces laughing as the water sprays like crystal beads. A quirky tidbit flows in. Marco Polo himself once wrote of rivers so wide in Central Asia that travelers swore entire floating villages drifted upon them, moving like cities on water. Whether exaggeration or not, you can't help picturing it, a city that simply refuses to stay put. The path ahead climbs gently into a landscape dotted with flowering shrubs, the air now heavy with the scent of sage and wild thyme. You pluck a sprig and rub it between your fingers, releasing a sharp fragrance that clears your mind. Conversation drifts lazily through the caravan, a mix of business deals, gossip, and idle daydreams. Historians still argue whether caravans function more like families or more like temporary corporations. As you listen to the shared jokes and occasional disputes, you think the answer is probably both a chaotic blend of loyalty and self-interest bound by the road itself. Afternoon deepens. The sun slants shadows lengthen, and the caravan crests a rise that reveals the valley below. There, nestled among trees and stone walls, lies a larger city, its domes and towers gleaming in the waning light. Relief ripples through the group, a collective exhale at the sight of roofs, wells, and markets waiting with open arms. Joke number 2 lands softly. Your feet practically break into applause at the idea of not walking another step. You enter the city by its northern gate, greeted by guards who glance at the caravan with professional boredom. Inside, streets bustle with life donkeys, braying merchants shouting the smell of fried bread, curling around corners. The caravan melts into the crowd, becoming part of the city's pulse. You wander wide-eyed, marveling at baskets piled high with pomegranates, stalls glittering with copper bowls, the rhythm of hammers from a distant smithy. The final tasks of the day unfold. Goods traded, contracts signed, animals led to stables. You watch as bolts of silk are unrolled under the approving eyes of buyers, while spices are pinched between fingers, sniffed, and debated with theatrical flair. The cycle feels eternal, stretching backward and forward in time, unbroken. As dust settles, you sit on a low wall near the marketplace. The air cools, torches flare, and the city hums with evening life. A storyteller begins to weave tales in the square, children clustering around with wide eyes. The sound of his voice drifts to you, snippets of heroes, gods, and far-off lands, and you close your eyes, letting the words mingle with the day's fatigue. Joke number 3 drifts in gently, no matter the century. A good story is basically the original streaming service, low resolution, high imagination. The night folds in, and you retreat to your lodging, a small room with plastered walls and a mat on the floor. You lay back, the noise of the city fading to a lull, and reflect on the journey, on the laundry lists, the markets, the deserts, the endless miles of rhythm and routine. And here the story begins to quiet. The words soften, the pace slows, as though the world itself is readying for rest. You breathe deeply, feeling the cool air of the night drift through the shutters, carrying the faint scent of bread ovens gone cold. You think of Marco Polo's packing list, not just the physical items, but the invisible ones: patience, endurance, curiosity, and humor. Perhaps that's the true list every traveler carries, no matter the century. Perhaps that's what binds you to this ancient road, even across time. Your mind drifts to the stars outside, steady and unchanging, the same stars Marco Polo might have traced on his sleepless nights. The cycle of departure and arrival of labor and rest continues endlessly, as eternal as the pulse of the earth itself. So in this final hush, let yourself ease into stillness. The caravan has reached its resting place. The fires are low. The road will wait for another day, and now you rest. The story slows now, like a river easing into a quiet delta. The noise of the city fades, replaced by the steady hum of night air. You lie back, every muscle softening, as though the journey's weight has finally lifted from your shoulders. Each breath is a little slower, a little deeper, carrying away the dust of the road, leaving only calm. The stars above shimmer steady beacons in the endless sky. They seem patient, almost timeless, waiting, without hurry, without demand. You picture them as silent companions, guiding travelers centuries ago, and guiding you now, though your path leads only to sleep. Their light, cool and constant, drapes you in a blanket of quiet. The faint scent of bread lingers still, as if the ovens never fully rest. You let that warmth linger in your mind, a reminder of comfort, of nourishment, of simple rituals that echo across generations. And beneath it all, the road itself hums gently in your imagination, a ribbon of dust that winds on without end, promising discovery, yet content to pause when night falls. Let your thoughts drift like caravans fading into the horizon, their torches flickering smaller and smaller until they vanish into the dark. Let your body sink deeper into the softness beneath you, the world narrowing into silence, into rest. The cycle continues, but tonight it carries you not across deserts or valleys, but into dreams. And now, with the journey complete and the story dimming close, your eyes let your breathing steady and slip into sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.